Hey, this is Bomani for the Sprint 3 sprint video. Um, so this sprint we focused on primarily designing, building, and testing three interfaces. The first interface was the JARS interface. This interface allows students to list out a bunch of deliverables and then rank the essentialness versus the difficulty of each of these on an interactive graph. We also have the DTRs bars visualization, which is pretty familiar to DTR students, as the mentor does use this one sometimes during SIG meetings. Essentially, it allows students to consider a balance of how many points they want to increase or how much knowledge they want to gain in either design, technology, and research for some of their major claims or research questions during a sprint. And then we also have the radar chart, which allows students
I just
to
said three. Is
kind
it
of
two?
measure different alternatives, map out different alternatives at a really high level, at the claims level, for how they want to divide their work. So just seeing how much points they want to put towards which claims during a given sprint. So what we basically learned is that for the JARS interface, there's a lot of like entry costs for the students. People had to think of all these different options, and the interface doesn't necessarily afford actually helping you out with the generation process. The chart, though, was pretty effective in evaluating. Once the options were on the chart, I think it was pretty straightforward for students to start to realize like which things they really wanted to do or which things would be helpful. But the quality of the sort of output of doing this process is really dependent on the options you generate. So we wanted to look into ways that we could kind of help to generate better sort of slices for plans during this process. The DTR bars was also interesting. The main thing here was that the payout for students was a little bit too low to sort of justify the cost of entering all the data. So you have to go through and add all of these things that you have done in the past. The work done could in the future have been powered by pulling from the sprint plans, but for now you have to enter these in, and then you have to enter in the work that you will do. And just being able to see from there like a visualization of how much or how little you've done in a certain area didn't seem to be to motivate students or to specifically be something that they found to be very helpful or value delivering for their process. In SIG meetings, when the mentor uses, it might be a little bit more well supported, but from the interface, the way that we had it here, it didn't necessarily do much for the students. The radar chart did afford helping students to think through different alternatives, just because we had the different options here listed. But it didn't really help students to create sensible slices. So yes, you can kind of at the high level determine how much balance you want to put on to each, how you want to balance out your work on claims, but there wasn't any way for students here to sort of break that down into what the action items would be for a given sprint. So maybe you do want to do more on claim one, but what are those 5 points worth of things that you actually plan to do? And so we had a lot of confusion on understanding how the high level balancing of the claims would actually break down to deliverables that students would be able to complete. We also, this sprint, started to write out some of our user needs and claims for each of the different interfaces. So we went through and did the testing, and then we wanted to just start to understand some of the measures of success and to determine what the perceived benefits would be here in the top row versus the actual benefits. So these are all the things we hoped that the interfaces would do, and then from testing the things that they actually ended up doing. So for example, with DTR bars, they did actually get people to think about their research progress and direction, and with the radar chart, it did help them to figure out how research efforts are being divided. But there are a lot of things that we hoped it would do that it didn't necessarily do, and we wanted to consider that as well. We also kind of started to think about at that point just different measures of success, things that we wanted to teach and how we could measure for those things as well. This was sort of our initial phase of like getting a little bit more of a sense of the direction we wanted to go in here with everything.